All right, welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Eric Caparo. I'm joined today by Eric Franchi and our special guest, Antonio Garcia-Martinez, the CEO and founder of Spindle, as well as an author, as well as a podcast host and guest. Antonio, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ari.
So before we get started, a quick intro or promo. So this week on Marketecture TV, we have a great interview with Walter Knapp, the CEO of Sovereign, which is an SSP that focuses on smaller accounts. Very interesting stuff. They're one of the innovators to have a flat rate SSP, so no percentage of media. Super interesting. All right, now let's get into it. So Antonio, people know you for your book. They know you for being sort of an ad tech person, for being a non-ad tech person, for having sort of a wide variety of interests that you talk about publicly. What brings you back to ad tech as a CEO? So you're the CEO of Spindle. What made you dive back in? And is it right to even call it ad tech?
No, it definitely is. I mean, it's in Web3, which I know, Ari, you don't believe in, so let's just get that out of the way.
I don't.
But you're wrong. You're totally wrong. You're totally wrong. And in fact, like, what is there even to talk about in Web2 ad tech anymore? Isn't that shit already settled? I mean, everything's been built. Like, who's even investing in it? I mean, this is like a joke. I mean, it's like the American Empire. It's still there, but we all know its days are numbered. Anyhow, so yeah, the part of it is, for starters, why crypto and why Web3, and then why marketing within that, I think is probably the way to order these questions. So one is, you can believe the whole crypto vision of everything going on chain and what that means in some decentralized way. You don't even have to buy all that. If I can just exist in a world in which I don't have to think about what Google and Facebook are doing, that alone is already reason enough to do the entire Web3 vision. Even if it ends up, as I suspect will be the case, replicating a lot of the dynamics of Web2, but it's just not going to be like Zuck and Sundar in your face, basically telling you what's going to happen. As long as we just get to that point, it's already worth doing. That's my apologia, so to speak, for crypto. And then why Martech or AdTech, whatever you want to call it. The reality is, part of why I got crypto pilled or did Spindle is that, like, I have friends who work in crypto. They made introductions, started talking to people, the head of a region for a major billion-dollar crypto company, and they had no idea what their LTVs and CACs and retention rates. So like the most basic user growth metrics, they had no idea what was going on, like at all whatsoever. They might not even know what an LTV is, okay, much less know what the number is. I'm like, I don't understand how this is possible. I now understand why it's possible, but at the time I didn't understand it. And the problem is, and I don't know if you want to do a follow-up question, but like part of the problem is that, and this is as much feature as bug in Web3, they financialized early, right? There was an existing business model, which is token go up, right? And that business model did work for a number of years, right? If you were a big project, you'd launch a token, it would go up. You'd get liquidity that way. The funding docs were even written such that VCs would get exit liquidity through the token, not through equity. Same thing with Spindle, by the way. And so there was already an existing liquidity model because everything was super financialized. If token doesn't go up, right, it turns out it's not a law of nature that token goes up. Then you actually have to start thinking about unit economics. What are my CACs? What's my LTV? What's my ROAS? And people just hadn't asked themselves that question until roughly a year ago when Spindle was founded. Now they are asking that question, and Spindle is helping answer that question. That's kind of the state of marketing.
So is the way to think about Spindle is it's analytics for Web3 companies, or is the way to think of it as analytics using Web3 for anybody?
It's actually attribution.
It's attribution. Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, attribution.
Sure. In this crowd, for your audience, we can make that distinction. In Web3, that distinction gets lost, by the way, and we have to constantly draw that fine line. But no, it's the model. We're basically Branch or AppsFlyer for.
But is it for Web3 companies, or is it for everyone using Web3 technology?
Ideally the latter, but in reality, right, the second, more the former. What I mean by that is, like, how to Spindle work. You click on a thing, there's like a tracking deep link, just like an AppsFlyer branch. You click on it, you go to a landing site, you log in with your wallet, and then you eventually do something on chain. And by do something on chain, I mean you buy the NFT, you trade a cryptocurrency, whatever. Stuff happens, and the database of record is on chain. What Spindle does is, instead of firing those conversion events to Branch or AppsFlyer via mobile SDK, or instead of firing the Facebook pixel on the website to Facebook saying, hey, the user did a thing, what happens is we go and index the magic of the blockchain is that you go and index that data, and we have a common database, rather than like when I was at Branch, nothing against Branch, but we were sitting there and you're just ingesting millions and millions and millions of events a day, which I know everyone thinks that crypto is like super inefficient. Dude, guess what? Web2 ad tech is inefficient as fuck, right? In the sense of like, we're all sitting here reconciling state to each other all the time. It's like, why doesn't everyone just write it to the same database and we all read it from the same database? How about that brilliant idea, right? And so that's part of what led to Spindle. It's like, well, actually, if you were to legitimately rebuild some part of Web2 ad tech using blockchain technology, where you'd start actually is with attribution. And for the reason I just cited, which is the app doesn't have to fire all these events to Facebook and Google and Branch and AppsFlyer and 600 other people. And when I want to go target somebody, I don't need to pull data from 100 data sources and create an audience segment and then reload that back up to something else. You don't need to do all that. It actually exists in a common database called the blockchain. So in many ways, actually, the blockchain is actually better as a marketing stack. And I think over the long term, Web3 ad tech's going to be a lot more interesting and sophisticated, frankly, than where we are in Web2 right now. I know Ari is having a stroke, but I do.
I'm not okay. Let me just defend myself before I get more questions in, which is I wrote sort of a pretty epic thread about the Web3 nonsense, and because nonsense really bothers me when people just spout nonsense like, hey, Web3 is decentralized, so it's better. That's nonsense. That's not a actual argument. And in particular, this idea that it would decentralize all media, which I believe is, speculative at best. So that's my position on Web3. On everything else, on your business, whatever, I'm open-minded. I'll see what I see.
Well, I think the way to sell you on Web3 is not decentralization, which I agree is almost like a religious.
It is.
It's a religious belief that decentralizing, it's like biology, right? It's like this cultish religious belief that if we just decentralize everything is better. And I have nothing against religious beliefs, to be blunt. We can talk about that, actually. Ari might read the Jewish conversion. The way to sell the Aris of the world on Web3 is by citing the fact that it's interoperable. Like I write to the chain and somebody else can actually read from the chain and come to a conclusion. It's permissionless. Like one thing we're doing is there's these thing called quests, which are like offer walls, right? Like they offer user virtual goodies and then they convert on chain. Like we can measure those permissionlessly. What we mean by that is like we can just go and measure like parts of the funnel without getting everybody involved. And we can just, it actually does work.
Yeah, no, I as usual, I'll sort of like be the voice of moderation here. So, the core of what we work on is Web2, but we actually have a couple of Web3 ad tech investments in the fund, and I think the way you framed it is exactly right. One question for you, Antonio, is like, what's the state of advertising and marketing in Web3 right now, right? Because we're kind of like in the crypto winter, the NFT market is, sort of like plummeted through the bottom. That's presumably affecting, overall like marketing activity. So what are you seeing as, the source of truth for, I would guess, a lot of the, hardcore Web3 marketers?
So in terms of marketing trends, it's actually been good for us. Like as the crypto markets have gotten worse, we've gotten more inbound because again, everyone realizes they actually have to measure spend now and actually build.
So they're more ROI focused.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for us, it's bad for the ecosystem. For us, selfishly, it's been good because all these big companies like, holy shit, like it turns out ROAS has to be positive. We can't just give away NFTs and tokens and hope users show up and have this massive negative, float between rewards given out and actual monetization. They actually have to start making it positive. So obviously we don't want to stay in this state forever, but I think if we get into a crypto bull market now, everyone would forget about the lessons and just go right back to token go up and it would suck. So we need like a year more of pain. Everyone needs to adopt Spindle as a measurement platform, and then we can have a bull market again. That would be, frankly, from my point of view, ideal. Just of, the gods of crypto, if they're listening, give us like one more year of bear market and one more year of cycle. And then let's go straight into the, Bitcoin 120K all the way. But what we're seeing, more broadly is like, what is the state of Web3 marketing? I'd split into two fractions. One is there's what I would call Web3 native marketing and native advertising, things like NFT drops. If you don't know what that is, like one of the weird things of Web3 is that you've got this thing called a wallet and anybody can deposit and message it and send stuff to it because it just exists on chain. And so if you're willing to pay what's called the gas fee, which is kind of the network fee, you can just send stuff to a user. And a lot of what they've done is, and again, Web3 people don't talk about it this way, but they're basically ads, right? You send somebody an NFT, it kind of shows up in the wallet, although it tends to be below the fold and the click-through rates are terrible. So it's really kind of crappy advertising. And then there's also things like referral programs that in Web2 is kind of a sketchy affiliate thing, but in Web3, it's much more common in DeFi. For example, if I'm a DeFi whale, so I spend a lot of money trading cryptocurrencies, I give you a link, Eric, you go trade. It's completely common and accepted for there to be like a 10, 20, 30% rev share from all that user's trading fees to me forever, which is like a lot of money actually, because the other thing about Web3, LTVs are much, much higher than Web2. So when you see the DAUs that are like orders of magnitude lower, it's like fine, but guess what? The LTVs are about an order of magnitude higher than they are in Web2. Like it's common to see a wallet with 50K sitting around in it, when like the average amount that an American has in a checking account is like $400 or something, right? But your average Web3 user will have like, the value of a Tesla just sitting in their little hot wallet, sloshing around, creating and punting on NFTs or whatever. But that's actually very common. So there's like the Web3 native marketing stuff that's all kind of weird, but kind of interesting. And then there's what I'd call the hybrid marketing stack, which is people trying to spend money or make Web2 media work spending money on Twitter ads or Facebook or organic posting, or even crypto Twitter is actually super big, and then hoping that it kind of converts. And if they're using Spindle, they can actually measure it. They can like click on a link on the Twitter thing, the person converts on chain, they can tie it together. But most people, like, they don't actually measure it. So they just kind of hope and, spray and pray and then hope something happens. But there isn't, what we're working on is like that iterative flywheel of like, oh, I target an audience, they come in, they do a thing, I learn a new thing about the audience, I get more third-party data, I target them again. Like that whole flywheel hasn't kicked off in Web3 yet. And that's part of the reason why it's still kind of stuck. And that's what we're trying to fix.
Are there mainstream brands and agencies spending money in this stuff?
We've done pitches with like the top 5 like holding companies. I won't name names, not that it matters, but they all have like a Web3 innovation guru team internally. And you know better than I do how agencies work, right? Like they'll do little experiments. Nike does NFT drops. It's the cool thing to do. They don't measure it particularly. They don't measure it at all, frankly. And the spend by the standards that you and I are used to on the Web2 world haven't gotten up there yet.
Yeah, it's experimental money.
It's experimental, yeah.
Yeah, the canonical examples of the past couple of years were like Nike, Adidas, and Porsche. So like big brands that did some cool stuff, did it once, and TBD on where it comes back. So you talk about sort of like wanting another year of the bear to build, so to speak. Where do you think we are in the cycle? Because a lot's happened, right? FTX, 3AC, Coinbase getting sued, the regulatory stuff. Do you think this stuff is largely behind us and some sort of new cycle is beginning and could have like real implications for Web3 marketing? Or do you think it's just like still we're sloshing around bouncing around towards the bottom, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, NFT volumes are low, DeFi volumes are low. Yeah, I'd like to say, there's been this amazing resurgence. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think a lot of the bad mojo around FTX is over. The regulatory hurdles with Gary over there in DC are definitely very serious. To be honest, I don't know how much of that spells the death or a threat to crypto, or it's just US crypto that's going to be impacted, right? I think it's public at this point that A16Z is opening an office in London, very intentionally. They're doing the crypto startup school for the first time next year in London, not in LA, where they just did it this year. And so I think the UK could stand to gain a lot from the US being dumb about crypto. So that could be a thing.
I think a lot of people, and I've heard this sentiment, say that the NFT world and a lot of the Web3 world is really just an adjunct of gaming at this point. It's all gaming. That's the product market fit, and the rest is not really real. Is that any truth to that?
I think there's a seed of truth to it. Gaming and Web3 is interesting because unlike DeFi, right? With DeFi for those decentralized finance, so it's basically replicating all of Wall Street on chain. For reasons that might seem unclear. If you like Wall Street, why you're doing this. If you don't like Wall Street, it's like obvious. But in any case, it's basically reproducing all of Wall Street on chain. So that's DeFi. That is obviously natively on chain in the sense that like there is no user action that matters that doesn't happen on chain. So an attribution solution like ours that uses the chain as the source of truth works perfectly in DeFi. Let's move to gaming. There, the world's a little bit weirder. There, what you see is you don't see Web3 and then you don't see just pure Web2. You see Web 2 point something, where the something is either 2.1 or 2.6 or something. And what I mean by that is like, either it's like a totally normal Web2 game. I mean, for example, I think Fortnite just announced that they're going to use, I forget whose NFTs or adopt NFTs. You've got Fortnite, which is like, it's basically like a super popular standard Web2 game. Oh, and then by the way, you can buy this thing called an NFT. And who knows in like the user flow, how crypto native it is. They probably issue you a wallet. Like you probably won't even know that you're on a blockchain when you're using Fortnite's NFT product, which is, by the way, potentially how it should be. One of, I think, the legitimate complaints about the consumer experience on Web3, and part of the reason why it hasn't taken off, is that it's hard to use, right? Like I remember when I first tried to use a Web3 game, I won't name the name, but it was basically impossible to get to like an end state where you used it. Like the UX, like literally if you had shipped this at Facebook when I was there, Zuck would have had you murdered, right? There's no way that you could have shipped this onboarding flow. It's like, are you trying to maybe not use the app? Like it's literally like, this is impossible to use. I think that's changing. Like, so Reddit, for example, now has profile pics that are NFTs. I've got an NFT profile pic. You wouldn't necessarily know that you're on chain by using it. You're like, oh, I don't know. I went to Reddit, I went to Little Market, I bought a thing, and like it all just works and whatever. But they are on chain, and you have a wallet, and you can go into the UI and get your seed for it, like all that stuff. It's as crypto native as anything. Most users won't use those aspects of it, but it's crypto native. So anyway, a lot of these games are going to be built that way, in which the crypto part of it is just like a fraction of the value transfer. What does that mean for ad tech? Just to nerd out for a second. Well, for us, it's a little complicated, right? Because like our magic is measuring the stuff on chain. We don't want to go out and reproduce Apps Flyer or games. Right. I was just on a podcast with the head of gaming for AppsFlyer and then the CEO of GameSite, which is the PC console version of AppsFlyer. And it's like, it would be both dumb and suicidal to try to go after AppsFlyer and like reproduce, gaming app install tracking, which at this point is like a solved problem. Like, we're not going to do that. But what we bring to the table is the on-chain part, which they don't have because data infra on blockchain is both embryonic and kind of hard, right? And so what we could do is like into that data flow, we can inject all the on-chain parts. And how we do this, it's not quite clear. Do we post custom events to AppsFlyer? I don't know. Who knows how that's going to actually play out at the end of the day? But the gaming world's a little bit more unclear because it's a little bit more hybrid. There's stuff happening on chain, but the entire game isn't on chain typically. And so, yeah, it's a little bit TBD. But just to answer the question, like, I don't think it's all of NFTs. I think NFTs are very natural. Like trading card games, Magic the Gathering is an NFT game effectively, right? But it's like in physical space as a physical card. But, they get speculated on. There's like the one Magic card from the certain pack that like is worth $10,000 or whatever. Guess what, dude? That's like Bored Apes, basically, right? There's like all these NFT projects in which people punt around and trade these cards. And yeah, it has a utility in the case of the game, but it's assumed a value that's way beyond the utility in the game, right? And so I do agree that NFTs are adapted to gaming, but I don't know. I think, there are artsy NFTs that people actually appreciate and display in their homes. And it's funny when people were kind of like shitting on like NFTs and it's like, oh, it's just like, it's like a, there's no long tail. It's only a few elite collections. People do it as conspicuous consumption. And there's probably all this like, money laundering. And it's like, oh, so it's like the regular fine art market is what you're saying? like the guy who buys a Rothko, do you think it's any different than the guy who buys a Bored Ape? It's just, the guy is just, 40 years younger, but it's the same. It's exactly the same thing. There's probably money laundering going on and ill-gotten funds. And it's obviously like a showy thing that a lot of people look at either a Rothko or a Bored Ape and say, oh, I don't like it. Why would you pay $10 million for that? Here we are, right? So
yeah, going back to attribution, because I like what you said, that attribution's I don't know if you said the most appropriate or first appropriate use case, because in the traditional attribution world with AppsFlyer, et cetera, there are some serious flaws to the way they operate, like the self-attributed networks and frankly, Apple, ATT cutting off enormous amounts of signal for them. I'd assume that when you think about your business, you think you're immune to that sort of problem, that there would never be someone big and powerful enough to cut off the attribution or to self-attribute on the blockchain. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, for now there wouldn't be. I mean, I think it'd be very difficult to imagine a Google or a Facebook, because by its very nature, again, the decentralization thing is partially a religious impulse, but it's also kind of partly true in that it really is the case that it'd be difficult. I mean, the only behemoths you have is maybe the chains themselves, right? If one of them went rogue or something, maybe they could work that way. But just to address those concerns for a second, right? Like the business of pulling the plug, right? So ATT is basically killing IDFA, and then browsers rejecting cookies is basically killing the traffic on Web 2 and Web 3. The key thing for attribution is basically identity. What do I mean by identity? It means the person who's top of funnel and the person who's bottom funnel have to agree on a namespace for the user who came in and did a thing. And if you can't do that, then you can't calculate anything, right? The CAC you're spending on top of funnel stuff and the revenue that you're getting, the LTV you're getting from the down funnel stuff, you can only calculate that fraction if you can actually join it in some way. And that's what basically Apple killed for a bunch of reasons that are probably not worth going into. In Web3, that would be much harder to do. And in fact, what we're seeing, and in fact, we're happy to see it, by the way. Like one of the magical things we do is joining Web 2 to Web 3, and that's important because Web 2 is never going to go away. But what I think would be much more interesting is for the wallet address, which again is like this unique string that identifies kind of your entity inside the blockchain world, right? If that became the new IDFA, right? If that became the new namespace for attribution, well, that would be amazing, right? It would mean that you'd have a publisher like a wallet or a questing platform or some social network. You're starting to see social networks built on chain. That becomes a wallet ID, and then you can track that through the entire funnel. The user has total control. They know what data is associated with their wallet ID because it's totally public. If they don't like it, they can spin up another wallet very easily, right? I think they're going to be incentivized not to do that because that wallet will be associated with user behaviors that'll be rewarded, right? Like if you consistently use this app or retain this NFT, you have rights and privileges that you wouldn't have if you were a different wallet ID. And that's going to incentivize people to stick to that wallet ID. But if they really want to, you know what? You can just say goodbye. And unlike in Web 2, in which, yeah, you hit the little opt-out thing for GDPR, but is your data really deleted? Do you really know what's going on? Of course you don't know what the hell's going on because it's super murky and not transparent. In Web 3, that's not true. The user can actually completely see what's associated to the wallet.
from the marketer's perspective, if someone big and powerful like Meta were to attribute their own conversions using events that happen on the chain, well, the marketer could just look and do their version of the attribution because it's all on the chain, right?
That's right.
You know, so
can I say one more thing about if we're nerding out about attribution in blockchain? The other thing that I think the blockchain improves upon is, as you know, like there was always this talk about MTA. In fact, we literally had a conversation with a big Web3 company right now. They hire, another thing you're seeing, by the way, is Web2 ad tech people going into Web3, looking around and saying, what the fuck? Why isn't there attribution? Why isn't there data? Why isn't it? Which we love, because then we can show up with like the solution, or at least a basic V1 solution of the problem. But one of the problems why multi-touch attribution, right? That was always a holy grail. Oh, let's have multi-touch. Why did it never really take off? Because attribution, if we're being very cynical after the third comp drink at an ad tech conference, is that like attribution doesn't actually tell you causal truth. It doesn't actually tell you why this user converted. It basically tells you, do I pay Facebook or Google or Apple 11 or some other network? And that's the only reason why attribution exists, because it's coupled to a business model called CPA, which after many, many years of iterating from CPM and going down the funnel, CPM, CPC, CPI, now we're at CPA, it's basically an input into a payment scheme. That's all attribution really is in the Web2 side, if we're being honest. And the way that payment works, I can't pay both Google and Facebook. Even if they both legitimately causally contributed to the conversion, there's no way I could actually ever really do multi-touch as a business model. Well, guess what? In Web3, you can, because you have programmable money. And here I am talking my book here a little bit in the sense that part of what we built as the attribution system is an on-chain smart contract that pays out the person that we credited for the conversion, right? And that payout contract can pay many people, right? So if this podcast was a Web3 native podcast and I issued a link, or you posted a link in the notes to this thing, and then the user also saw a tweet, and then the user also came through a wallet, guess what? Everyone could eat a little bit from what is, the CAC that the advertiser is willing to pay for having generated that user. Everyone sees all those touch points. Everyone sees the actual realized revenue. So you can actually see, okay, there's no monkey business going on. Like, it turns out, yes, this was real user value and everyone can get paid for that. And you actually can have multi-touch attribution. So right now, Spindle supports first touch, last two touch, and like we've got all these various models. But at some point, I think it'll converge to a world where, in fact, you do realize the final holy grail of marketing, which is true multi-touch attribution.
Right, because the advertiser could impose a smart contract as part of their purchase advertising purchase. They could say, here's our IO, or whatever the Web3 version of an IO is, and you're paid based on an agreed upon smart contract that does MTA or whatever.
Right. And for those who aren't familiar, smart contract is literally, imagine you put a little bit, like literally a function on this public database. It's not just a database, like something like the Ethereum blockchain is basically a decentralized computer, right? What it means is I put code on chain, all the nodes in the network execute that chain. And if it execute that smart contract, and if the smart contract says, hey, anyone who upstream of this user, drove this user, pay them 2% of the eventual realized value, and the computer just does it, right? There's no Facebook or Google sitting there doing it. Like, it just happens, and the entire ecosystem makes it happen. Code has become law in the sense of like, this is the way it is. And that opens up a lot of possibilities. And again, you can imagine a world in which you do have an entire media ecosystem functioning in which you don't need a Google or a Facebook in the middle of it saying, this is reality, this is what happened, this is how you paid for the user. See? Don't you want to invest, Eric? I think you might be. Actually, Ari, aren't you an LP in Orange Funds? So you are indirectly an investor.
I'm indirectly an investor.
There you go.
You were on Orange Podcast. You were on Joe Rogan.
It's true.
You're really good at explaining this stuff, which I want to mention Chaos Monkeys. So I think it's undoubtedly Chaos Monkeys is the best book ever written about ad tech. Is there even any competition? I don't know what the second best book would be written.
I was about to say, it's easy to be superlative if you have zero competition. So yes, strictly speaking, I agree with you. It is the best book written about ad tech. It's also the only book written about ad tech, but that's fine.
It's not, for those who have not... Yeah, there's a lot of sort of nerdy stuff written about ad tech, but for those who have not read it, A, you absolutely should, and B, it's not about ad tech. It's about Antonio's experience building an ad tech business, working at the biggest ad companies, and it's an incredible read.
Well, that book can be read several ways, and I know that the personal side of it got me into a little bit of trouble in there. We won't get into, but and to be honest, that was mostly injected by my editor, because my editor was like, this needs to be like a Michael Lewis level liar's poker type thing. And so like literally crank up the Hunter S. Thompson voice as much as you possibly can, which Seemed like a great idea in 2016. Maybe it wasn't such a great idea in 2021. But in any case, but in there is decent amount of ad tech stuff. Like I explain how Google AdWords work. I explain how like custom audiences and all this identity matching stuff happens. And so there's a decent amount of ad tech content in there. But yeah, it's definitely not like an MBA business book on ad tech, which my God, imagine how boring that would be. But
there is a book, I think it's called Clicked, that was written by, I think Mike Smith, who's at Hearst. That's probably the second best ad thing. So just one quick thing on Chaos Monkeys. It's about 7 years old, 7 years since it came out according to Amazon. I think the second half of the book sort of positions this question at Facebook at the time, which is, should Facebook monetization be open, meaning exchange-based with other sources of demand coming in, or should it be closed, which is the direction they ended up going with everyone using the Facebook platform? Looking back, did they make the right decision? And like anything that has struck you in the last 7 years that you think should have been different?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that was a big decision at the time. And, you know, this only matters to ad tech geeks, but this is an ad tech geek podcast, so we'll go into it.
It is.
Yeah, the debate at the time. So, okay, my claim to fame at Facebook is that, you know, I had worked at now forgotten ad tech startup called Adcomy, and I had built like a Google AdX bidder like circa 2009 or 10 when a lot of that RTB programmatic stuff was taking off. It wasn't that long ago, but, you know, Yahoo Right Media was still a thing, right? Like things are still pretty basic as late as 2010 in the ad tech world. But I knew that there was this very real programmatic world. And inside Facebook, I remember, so I was the first product manager for the targeting system to the extent we had one on Facebook. And I was just shocked at how bad it was and how Facebook data was not very good. Like your everyday Facebook data is actually not commercially interesting. Like Zuck isn't listening to your conversations, not because he's particularly morally upstanding or even the technical hurdles, which are significant. But the reality is that like my little blather actually isn't commercially interesting. Right. And you'd have to listen to reams and reams of it. Like me just like knowing what websites I go to or knowing who I know on Facebook is way more commercially valuable than anything I would ever say. And then it's like, dude, what do we do? There's this whole outside world of data. We need to start integrating with that. And so that's how it kind of started. And like, now, if you go browse the internet and you see what you browsed inside Instagram or Facebook, like we built the first versions of that, okay, in 2011, because like the IPO was coming up and Facebook's revenue was not taking off. And Cheryl was just screaming at everybody saying, you start fixing this shit, motherfuckers, like start building shit and start fixing this because the IPO is coming and the revenue isn't growing and we're all going to be fucked. So start shipping new shit. And I just raised my hand and said, well, we could build an RTB exchange. And back in the day, you could actually say, raise your hand, give a compelling spiel, and be given 3 or 4 engineers and completely roil an entire ecosystem. I remember, you probably know some of these, but we used to have basically every DSP, MediaMath, like everyone, AppNect, everybody would come in.
Yeah.
They'd come in with their senior C-suite teams, this major thing. They show up, I'm wearing flip-flops, a ratty sweater, and like one engineer. And I show them the team, which was literally like, he's like, oh, this is the FP. He's like, no, you're joking. Where's the real team? I'm like, no, bro, this is the entire programmatic effort of Facebook. This is how we're opening the walls in the garden to like 1/3 of the internet, and this is your way in. There's nobody else. And so
I was that guy. I was the guy who showed up in at Facebook in a blazer to meet with you when I was at AppNexus, and you gave me a Facebook sweatshirt. I still have it. I don't wear it, and it was very surreal to see your ragtag team.
But that ragtag team generated billions of dollars of revenue in the span of a couple of years. And so, answering your question of like, was it a mistake? I think in the short term, I was right that turning on targeted spend via programmatic was obvious, and it was a success. I mean, FBX lasted much longer than after I left because they kind of couldn't turn it off, right? Everyone sort of demanded that level of access. And over the longer term, I suspect they were actually correct. What the missing pieces that I had is that at the time, the Facebook ad system basically didn't work. The ads buying UIs were terrible. There was no attribution system, by the way. Mobile newsfeed ads had just started. So like, the pieces were just missing. And I frankly, from what I had seen inside the ad system, I was not confident they could actually build it. And so I'm like, and also I just wanted to like crush Google. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Why don't we just go out there and like compete with Google head to head? And that whole Lumascape of logos, let's just create that same thing. Not to be blunt, the people who were on the other side of me, I mentioned some of them inside Chaos Monkeys, Brian Boland. It's not because they were particularly smart. And frankly, some of them had zero product vision whatsoever. But I think just culturally, Facebook doesn't partner, as a peer with outside companies, and they are very suspicious of anything outside the Facebook sort of empire. And so, from their point of view, the FBX system was this weird advertiser that had like impression by impression level access to the Facebook ad system, and everyone fucking hated it, right? And the advertisers loved it Because of course, now I can actually finally target inside Facebook and bid $30 CPM in a landscape, by the way, that had like 50-cent CPMs as the average, right? So they'd win every targeted buy they could do on Facebook, at least initially, right? So they loved it. But Facebook's like, what the fuck? What do you mean they get in like, what? I don't understand. Like, why are we even doing this, right? So that was the sort of tenor of the conversation. And again, they were correct in the long term, not because they had some like brilliant vision. It's just like culturally, they just organ rejection, reject an open ecosystem.
Totally. Well, we have to take a break. We'll come back in 1 second and talk about the Zuck-Elon cage match. So stick with us. So the most exciting news of the week is that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg appear to be heading towards a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu cage match. And I'm very excited because we actually have the best possible panel to discuss this, because my co-founder, my co-host Eric, has been doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu for decades, and is really into it. And our host, Antonio, has worked with Zuck and can give us an appreciation of how likely he would be to kill a human being. Eric, you want to start?
Yeah. So number one, I can't believe this is real. But it actually seems to be real. So Elon responded to a tweet by somebody with an AOL email address as their username, said essentially sort of, let's get in the cage. Zuck posted on his Instagram story, send location, which, again, if somebody is trained and they say send location, you generally don't want to see that. That means they're ready to go. An hour before we started recording this, there was a tweet, again, I think it referenced a TMZ article that said Dana White spoke with both of them yesterday, and he said they are 100% serious, and he's trying to figure out how to make this happen. So A, I cannot believe this is happening. B, I think both of them are amazing founders, entrepreneurs. Zuck will absolutely destroy Elon, and he should not go anywhere near Zuck. Like Zuck is legit. He trains with the best in the world. He competed. He won medals. He has an aggressive fighting style. And Elon admittedly said the only exercise he gets is like lifting his little babies in the air. Granted, he trained back in the day, but listen, Zuck is 15 years younger. He trains every day. He did Murph, a world-class time over Memorial Day. And just the cardio alone, he's going to wear Elon out. And Elon's got Twitter, he's got Tesla, he's got SpaceX. We need him alive and functioning. Just Elon, it won't be embarrassing. Just say it was a joke. Just back away. That's my advice to him.
Antonio, do you think Zuck would actually murder him? Has he murdered someone in the past, Zuck?
No, I don't know him deeply well, but I did work for him, and I saw him in the earlier days of Facebook. Zuck is a very serious person. I know that somebody once doubted his claim that he could do 100 push-ups. And he said, I'll bet half your equity that I can do it. And the guy's like, no, thanks. Forget I said that.
That was send location 10 years ago.
Okay, exactly. No. So Zuck, in the secession sense of the word, not that I've even watched it, but I watched that one scene. He's a serious person. He's a killer. Yes, he would. And so I'm curious, Eric, so you are a BJJ guy. So have you've seen his training videos? Is he for real? Is he like a...
Yeah. He's very clearly trained, well trained. He has a real game. He fought like a good white belt. And I don't say that in any derogatory way. He's just had a very aggressive, go type of thing. And he pulled some moves. So, yeah. And I mean, clearly he's got the money to do anything from a training standpoint. And, I'm a nerd about this stuff. And I've seen him, training with the best in the world. He should not go anywhere near Zuck. Meaning Elon should not go anywhere near Zuck. Zuck is legit. He's taking this serious. All he follows on Instagram are fighters, and they all interact with him. So, yeah, I'm super impressed.
Well, Elon's principle of max lulls that he said on Twitter is that the most amusing outcome is the most likely. So in this case, the most amusing outcome is clear that the fight actually happened. But then imagine, like you said, what if human space exploration is set back 50 years because Elon gets his brain fucking bashed in by
exactly. I would pay an almost unlimited amount to watch this on people.
And Dana said, Dana White said it's going to be $100 if it happens, and he's paying all the proceeds. Of course, we're going to have a watch party. It would last 3 seconds realistically, because Zuck would take him down, get behind him, put him in a rear naked choke, and it would be over. He would tap. Hopefully, he would tap and not get choked out. But this is crazy. I think so. The poll should not be like who wins. The poll should be like, is this thing actually going to happen? And I peg that as like absolutely not happening. I think this is crazy. The fact that Dana White actually spoke to both of them, crazy.
I would take the other side of that. I'd say there's a north of 10% chance that this actually happened. Actually,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Didn't Romney once get in the ring with somebody? Like, this isn't totally unprecedented. I mean, not even mention Emperor Caligula in the first century in Rome or something. But yeah, Mitt Romney did an exhibition boxing match with somebody or something, and there's this footage of him. I'm not even joking.
I could actually picture it. I don't remember. I do think that it happened.
I mean,
this is probably
messed up his whole career with this. Like, he got into Mickey Rourke was so confident in his boxing skills, and then basically messed up his face, messed up his acting career, etc.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to talk about something ad tech related. So let's talk about the next story. So, so this one's pretty niche but interesting. Trade Desk integrates ID5. So I think ID5 is sort of a friend of the pod. We recorded from their event. It's an alternative ID. Having the Trade Desk integrated, and they announced this at Cannes, is kind of interesting. I guess I'm interested mostly in Antonio's point of view, because you're leaving behind the idea of IDs, of cookies or deterministic or probabilistic IDs. Do you see this as kind of like old news, not interesting, or do you think that there's still a world where IDs are going to proliferate?
Dude, I think it's so old that I'm like cheating and reading the Ad Exchanger articles. I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. This ID part. But oh god, it's some European crap. Imagine that. We have an identifier thanks to the Belgians. This is great. Look, obviously Web2 is not going to go away, right? Like, I don't think it's dying. I don't see there being a lot of room for, I don't know, progress or innovation there. Like, they're just cutting up the spoils for whatever's left after Apple ends up colonizing these various other media. And
so, Eric, you're an investor. Why is this an exciting announcement?
Yeah, so I'm an investor. I think that they're not sort of like calling a small pie. This is still a giant pie of like Web2. We keep calling it Web2, right? Sort of like digital advertising that they're they're partnering up to help power. This is great. Number one, as an investor in the business, they've done an incredible job building out the supply side. So they're the number one identifier globally, ahead of Trade Desk, UID, ahead of LiveRamp, ahead of Loadme. And the next step for them to really become like the standard is the demand side. So partnering up with TTD, i.e. the largest DSP, offering the ability for marketers, advertisers, agencies to start to use the ID5 ID starting in Europe is I think a great next step for the biz, and I think a really good signal. And then hopefully, as they mentioned in the article, this is step one to going to other markets, i.e. the US, and then ultimately other formats. So it's a big deal. It's great news. So congrats to them.
I shouldn't have been so dismissive, right? Like, obviously, like a 1% improvement went to advertising. It's still like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like, it's just the fraction is so much bigger. Yeah.
The next one's close to my heart. So NBCU and Freewheel announced a marketplace. It's an NBCU marketplace for connected TV inventory, but that's powered by Freewheel. And I was formerly an employee of Freewheel, so I have some perspective on this. I think this is interesting because Christian Baja, who I interviewed on Marketecture TV, and you should check out his interview, talked about how NBC itself is sort of investing very heavily in becoming a major hub for connected TV. And this announcement puts them in the center of the ability for advertisers to reach audiences on different connected TV publisher properties. And at Freewheel and NBC both being owned by Comcast enables that. I'm just giving my opinion here, which is the connected TV landscape is very dominated by big publishers like NBC and Disney. And this is sort of more evidence of that sort of dynamic as opposed to the web world where it's so fragmented that no one in open web really has much clout to push anybody around. Eric, do you have any thoughts on this, given that you've invested a lot in CTV?
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that this probably puts NBC in an interesting position, just vis-a-vis competing with some of the larger CTV players like a Roku, like an Amazon, just because they should be able to offer like A, sort of more inventory, and B, an omni-channel approach. So it's a good use of the Freewheel tech.
All right, we're out of time today. So Antonio, where could people find you? You have a podcast of your own?
We're not talking about more ad tech gossip. That's such a shame. It's funny. I have no idea
What you got
in this world anymore.
what do you got?
I was looking at your list. I'm like, huh, Yahoo still exists, huh? Like I saw like a Yahoo. No idea they still even exist. Like, oh, interesting. And then the CTV thing, I admit is interesting. I remember before I switched to Web3, I thought, like, are there other formats or other media that haven't been completely, programmatized, like audio or TV or something? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I guess that's still happening, right? Like TV and
that is. Well, yeah. Welcome back to AdTech 2023. Yeah. CTV and Yahoo and Identity and Google's still around too.
You know what's funny, AGM, you won't remember this. We once traded DMs, and at the time you were thinking if you were going to do ad tech, you told me, you were like AR, VR. That could be like, next greenfield, which, again, it's still looming out there. And again, seemingly like not a lot going on.
Yeah, the metaverse. I mean, yeah, it's just thinking back then, like I said, I was probably thinking about like what are new formats or what's new media that's kind of greenfield that obviously will end up having a publisher side, an advertiser side, an identity, some form of attribution system, and some form of targeting system, right? Like those are the food groups that you need to have like a functioning media ecosystem. And I was like, okay, where are people spending time that doesn't exist yet? And I think podcasting was in the mix. I did some podcasting stories for Wired. I remember I did a deep dive on podcasting. There still is programmatic audio, though it's not nearly as programmatic as you might think it is. And then, I guess AR, VR was kind of happening. But yeah, I don't know. Why hasn't VR? Well, maybe we're at the end of the show. We'll pick up that thing. But like, I don't. Yeah,
we can easily talk for another hour here. I'm not being a great moderator. We should have you back. We should talk about other things besides Web.
Yeah.
This time. All right, Antonio, thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Eric, always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks, Antonio.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.